Good afternoon. We are going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to call this meeting of the Climate Initiatives Task Force to order. Today is November 9th. It is 1:03 p.m. Ms. Kinchin, would you please call the roll?
Chair Vorhoff.
Here.
Commissioner Gordon. Here.
Okay.
Chair Vorhoff.
Here.
Commissioner Dorton. Here. Mr. Moses.
Here.
Mr. Davenport. Mr. Grandy.
Here.
Mr. Lambert.
Here.
Dr. Springer.
Here.
Ms. Higgins.
Here.
Ms. Porter.
Eric Calavota.
Dr. Calavota. Mr. Robertson.
Here.
Ms. Bush. Mr. Hardy. Mr. Gray.
Here.
Mr. Bowser. Ms. Beauchamp. Dr. Burkett. Ms. Gautreaux. Mr. Daniels. Mr. Chambers. Mr. Monroe. Ms. Pishon Battle. Chief Dardar. Mr. Verchick.
Here.
Ms. Manning Broom. You're good.
We have a quorum. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Kinchin. And as you can see, next on our agenda, we have a welcome and opening remarks from Governor John Bel Edwards, who will be here momentarily. But I appreciate everybody being here today. You know, this is the last Climate Initiatives Task Force of the term, of the year. And, you know, really the theme of this meeting is, you know, the look back, the look at what we're doing today, and the look ahead to the future. So we have a full agenda, a lot of updates, a lot of, you know, real substantive update on Climate Initiatives Task, or the CPRG, Climate Reduction Pollution Grant, that the division is administering in partnership with Governor's Office and other agencies of the state. It's a great opportunity to continue climate planning now and into the future. And so we'll look to get input from this task force on that, looking at a draft plan that will priority climate action plan. And then we will really do a reflection on kind of the look back, the action today, and the look ahead.
Depending on which one he sits at, you have to activate it. Just cut all the way until he walks in, and then you'll see which one he sits at.
Okay. Good morning, or good afternoon, Governor. Well, let me get your mic on, and we're going to ask Governor Edwards, Governor of the great state of Louisiana, to kick off this final Climate Initiatives Task Force meeting of the term. Today, as I mentioned, is going to be the look back. It's going to be a look at where we are today and a look ahead at the upcoming year and beyond. There are many accomplishments we want to highlight and celebrate, ongoing efforts that need our input and guidance. And as we wind this administration up, a look ahead to how to carry the momentum forward. And we're all here today and have come this far on climate planning and action because of the leadership and vision of Governor Edwards. So please give the governor a warm welcome this afternoon.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Harry, and members of the task force. It is great to be back with you all again. I was very heartened a while ago to stop in the hallway and have a bunch of high school students from Episcopal who are here today as well. I do want to start by thanking each of you and also the organizations, the agencies that you represent for going on this journey together with us this past 3 years. I think when we started this, everybody saw that there was potentially some political or economic risk to talk openly about climate change. But I think we can all agree that this effort could not have been more important or more timely. And the riskiest thing for us to do would have been to ignore not just climate change, but the energy transition, and not be able to participate in it and benefit from it. I suspect that not even the most optimistic among us could have predicted that we would be able to accomplish so much, or that we would be able to do it while keeping such a diverse group of stakeholders such as yourselves together. And I hope you are proud of your contributions. I know that I am, and I believe the state of Louisiana will be forever grateful by your leadership, because the state will benefit tremendously from it. And I know it seems like worlds away, but it was February of 2020, so this is, COVID was here, we just didn't know it. That kind of puts it into perspective. But at that time, we stated the obvious, that improving our resilience and providing for a more sustainable coast demanded a more proactive approach to greenhouse gas emissions. And as part of my second term coastal priorities, I announced that Louisiana, obviously an energy state, but with a coastal crisis, was going to build a balanced bottom-up set of solutions to reduce emissions and to do its part to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. And we also declared that this would be an opportunity-focused approach, one that made climate action a driver of new investment rather than a cause for economic contraction. And if you remember from the earliest days, we said this is 50% about the climate, 50% about economic development and diversification. And that's, I think, why we have been able to succeed on both accounts, precisely by acknowledging that the energy transition is going to take place with or without our participation. And so we might as well get out in front of it, shape it, and maximize the benefits that we can achieve. Through this process and through the adoption of the first climate action plan in the Gulf South, something I am very proud of, by the way, and I mention that everywhere I travel, and quite frankly, a lot of people are mentioning it to me. But we help normalize open conversations about the root causes of the environmental challenges that we're experiencing as a state. And with your help, the people who suffer disproportionately when extreme weather strikes and bear the burdens of economic expansion were brought to the forefront. And I think that in itself, it was a tremendous accomplishment. But the real legacy of the process you undertook for over 15 months and 49 public meetings will be the solutions that you delivered. The Climate Action Plan encapsulated those solutions by identifying 28 strategies, 84 action items to bring us to net zero by 2050. And it was so fortuitous for us because we couldn't have known that when you started the work, when you drafted the plan, that we were going to have the bipartisan infrastructure law coming so soon thereafter. And then after that, the Inflation Reduction Act. Those two acts of Congress give us the ability to move forward on many of those action plan items faster and to a degree that we could not have known was going to be possible. But it also positioned us to where we can better compete for the discretionary dollars that are available to us in those instruments. And we couldn't have imagined the response from the private sector. After all, this is not just about government action. In fact, I would tell you it's not primarily about government action. In the private sector, capital is moving to the energy transition in unprecedented ways. And really the role of the government is just to facilitate that. And I think that is what is happening. This is about a global energy transition that is taking root right here in Louisiana, and one that's going to have tremendous economic benefits for our state and for our people for generations to come. I always say that, we've been an energy state for over 100 years. If we're going to be an energy state 50 years from now, it will be precisely because we embrace the transition. And by our most recent count, over the last 6 years, the private sector has announced over $50 billion in capital expenditures in low-carbon and carbon-free projects in Louisiana, which are projected to create an estimated right at 23,000 jobs in and of themselves. This economic boom crosses multiple sections of our climate action plan, including industrial facilities deploying carbon capture, sustainable transportation fuels, battery manufacturing for electric vehicles, solar panel manufacturing, no and low carbon hydrogen, and much, much more. Utilizing federal grants, Louisiana is also seeing $1.27 billion for clean energy in the power grid, $164 million for electric vehicles like school buses, another $164 million for environmental remediation, including the plugging of orphan wells. And I got the count from Secretary Tom Harris today. This year alone, we have plugged 636 orphan wells. 636. Y'all are going to have a conversation in a little bit with the Commissioner of Conservation about methane reduction. Plugging orphan wells helps in that regard, too. $202 million for public transportation. The successful uptake of an offshore wind lease in federal waters off the coast of Cameron Parish. And we still have major proposals under consideration like Solar for All, which will create a program to expand the number of low-income and disadvantaged communities with access to affordable, resilient, and clean solar energy. And so I believe these last 3 years have shown without a doubt that our state is ready and willing to lead on climate action. We've built on our strengths in adaptation like the Coastal Master Plan and the Watershed Initiative, and we borrowed from their playbooks to tackle the root causes of climate change. And we've also built on our economic competitive advantages like our skilled workforce and supply chain to propel Louisiana to a brighter, low-carbon future. But we can all acknowledge this is just the beginning. Despite all the progress that we are here today to talk about and that we, quite frankly, should celebrate, there is so much more to do. In just 2 months, we're going to have an administration change, and it's my sincere belief that this work will live on precisely because the downsides of inaction are too great, and the upside from taking action and shaping our future are too powerful. I also have hope that this effort lives on because I think Louisiana is uniquely important in the global effort to address climate change. Our economy and workforce is historically and currently driven by oil and gas and petrochemical manufacturing, and those sectors remain important. And by the way, that's going to be the case for a long time. This is a transition, and it's going to occur over I don't know how many years or a couple of decades, whatever it's going to be. But we have tremendous industries in our state that remain very important. The good news for us is the most carbon-advantaged barrel of oil produced anywhere in the world is produced in the Gulf of Mexico, and it's produced under environmental regulations that we determine, that we enforce, and then that oil isn't transported very far before we can refine it and so forth. And so long as we're going to be consuming oil in this world, we might as well be doing it in the Gulf of Mexico with all of those benefits. But we also have intense vulnerabilities, as you all know, from extreme weather and other climate impacts that challenge the health, ecosystems, and economies of communities all across our state. But I think what you all have seen, and this is what's impressed me, is those aren't just challenges, they also represent opportunities. Opportunities in Louisiana and elsewhere around the world. As I mentioned, immense amounts of capital are being deployed to lower carbon emissions. And those investors want to invest in places like Louisiana where they can have the biggest impact. And if this was easy and straightforward, I suspect it would have been done a long time ago. Thomas Edison once said that opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls. It looks like work. Well, I think you all know that this has been work. But here in Louisiana, we know what work looks like. And we're not going to miss this opportunity. I think as you all have shown, the solutions that we develop here are the product of hard choices, hard compromises, hard work, which is what it's going to take to get the rest of the world to move along with us and actually reach net zero. And I think everyone has a role to play. But we in Louisiana, we can lead from the front and by example. And that's really the only two ways that you can lead. We built the action plan together in full view of the public. The process and the set of strategies and actions you recommended helped us win when federal dollars became available and when private companies were looking for a friendly place to invest in the emerging low-carbon economy. And I think it always behooves us to grow the economy, to diversify the economy, and this offered us a real way to do it in the short term, and that has taken root as we discussed. We know as we sit here, our emissions are not at net zero, but you know we knew they wouldn't be, but we have that goal by 2050, and we have intermittent goals. We know that the sea levels are still rising. I don't know if you saw the headlines. I think it was just today or yesterday. Climate scientists believe we're closed the books on the warmest year ever recorded this year. But we have built a roadmap to where we want to be as a state in the years to come. And we've also built the kinds of tangible, concrete wins that can show skeptics that this is real, that there is broad-based support for action, and that progress is possible. And in Louisiana, progress isn't just possible. I believe we have a moral obligation to pursue it because we are suffering the adverse consequences of climate change more than any other state in the nation, and our per capita CO2 emissions are among the highest. And so I believe we have a special obligation, a moral obligation to act. So once again, I thank you for your leadership, for your hard work, for your willingness to go out on a limb to make the state better, and for showing everyone how to work through differences and find solutions to one of the most pressing, important challenges of our time, and in a way where we win. We win in the short term, we're going to win in the medium term, we're going to win in the long term. And quite frankly, this kind of work is not happening in many places. It's not, but it was able to happen here because of your work, your leadership, your faithfulness to this process. So I thank you all very much, and a special note for Harry. I think your leadership from the very earliest days has just been tremendous, and I thank you for that, for your determination, for your vision, and for the great counsel that you have provided to me and to all the other members of the task force and state agencies across the board. So thank you all so much. I do appreciate your work, and I know that we are going to continue to benefit from this for, well, I think forever. Thanks, and God bless.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your leadership out in front and by example, and for calling this group together. I think I can speak on behalf of everybody that serving on this task force has been an honor and a privilege, and really, trying to steer Louisiana to a brighter future today and for future generations. So thank you.
Thank you. See you, Tyler. All right.
All right. Well, next up, we do have an action-packed agenda, and so moving right along, I'd like to invite to the table Commissioner Devontae Lewis. Commissioner is Commissioner of the Public Service Commission, District 3. The Public Service Commission is a constitutionally created, independently elected commission which regulates utilities of all types, including electric power utilities, which are so important to this task force and the subject matter of this task force and reducing our emissions in this state. So I want to just thank you, Commissioner Lewis, for being here today, for your partnership, and for being engaged with this task force. So thank you for being here, and we welcome any remarks on the clean energy transition, what you and your colleagues at the Public Service Commission are working on towards that end. I know you have a full docket, and so I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Task Force, for allowing me to be here. Once again, I'm Devontae Lewis. I represent the 3rd District on the Louisiana Public Service Commission, which encompasses 10 Louisiana parishes, the capital region here in Baton Rouge through the river parishes, and concludes with Orleans Parish. I can speak for myself as commissioner. This task force and its work is extremely important to the work that we do, and to the work of my constituents. As I mentioned mentioned, my district is nicknamed Cancer Alley by some. When we look at what is facing the people that I serve, if you are black or brown, you're 21 times more likely to be exposed to air pollution than any other place. I have more industry and industrial users than anywhere else in this country. When we talk about the prolific rate of poverty and what that means when we talk about the energy transition and energy burden and energy cost, it's one of the poorest areas in our nation. And then we can also talk about, as we all know, the threats of severe weather, from hurricanes to floods to droughts that have now occurred, particularly in the areas that I represent. And so part of the reason why I have been so committed to this work is because I have coined that while America may call my area and my district America's Cancer Alley, I believe if we do the important work that we are trying to do, we can turn that into America's Climate Answer Alley, because it hits all of the topics that face us when we talk about resiliency, sustainability, affordability, decarbonization, and so much more. And so I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today about what the Commission is doing and then also what my office is doing. When we think about the Public Service Commission's role in enacting this climate action plan, there's multiple things that I think we should do and we are currently doing. One of the most important that we have not taken up yet that I do plan in the next coming months to introduce at the Commission is creating a renewable portfolio standard. There are only 14 states currently in the United States that do not have an RPS. In Louisiana, we are not one of those. But in order for us to reach the goals that you have identified here and to commit to 100% clean renewable energy by 2035 and net zero by 2050, I believe it's important that we create this portfolio standard. As you are aware that only 3% of Louisiana's current renewable energy, so we know that an RPS could make a significant difference. But we are also doing real work that we think can lead to the decarbonization of our state. One of the processes is our integrated resource planning that we do with the utilities. So without an RPS, it does make it a little bit harder for us to pressure utilities into acquiring energy from renewable sources, but we are looking at that in their RPS. Right now, before the Commission, Entergy and CLECO has an RPS that I'm fully maximizing and asking them to use the benefits from the IRA for low-carbon energy, and to explain how they planned for their portfolio to be more diverse and give us the best options for our energy future. We know these IRPs are in the public interest, and so without an RPS, I think it makes it very hard for us to accomplish those goals, so we're really looking forward to doing that. But while we are doing that, the Commission has accelerated a lot of new resources. The main avenue has been our approval or rejection of renewable capacity and generation. We just approved over 200 megawatts of solar capacity for our local co-ops. We are currently reviewing Entergy, who is seeking an expedited approval of a 3 gigawatt solar power. And we're also looking at offshore wind and the new leases in federal waters and multiple contracts for projects in the state waters. And so we know that this work is important because not only does it reduce emission, it also makes people's utility rates lower, which is extremely important to countless of Louisianians. In our regional transmission organizations, in MISO and SPP, our state has taken action with my colleagues who have voted to use full opportunities for market participation and clearing up our interconnection queues. So out of the 155, of the 157 projects that are in Louisiana's interconnection queues, they are renewables and battery. So it is showcasing our commitment and the Louisiana's commitment to decarbonization. We are also looking at green tariffs to incentivize industry to buy renewable energy. We have currently narrowed down to 3 tariff options, and we are working our way through public comments as we speak right now, receiving those on which of those options would be the best to ensure that we are incentivizing industry to access green renewable energy. We're also working on grid resiliency because we know that if we do not have a resilient grid, it makes it very hard to decarbonize. As I've talked with industry users, any type of outage equals more emission from them, just proportionately by how their operations do. So we have to ensure that the grid can be reliable and sustainable. And so we are currently, we have a final proposed rule that has been published, which will require utilities to have a grid resiliency plan that meets minimum standards by our commission. And I think it's important for us to make sure that we are prepared uniquely for renewable connectivity and to protect our customers and industry from future outages so we can reduce our use of emissions. We're also significantly working on energy efficiency. Louisiana ranks 47th in the nation when it comes to energy efficiency and making sure that our homes in Louisiana can produce and survive. We are creating a framework right now that could overhaul the utilities energy efficiency program. We're also looking at ways that we can partner with the state. Just this morning, the commission, along with utilities, met with the state energy office about how to best access the new IRA funding for home energy rebates. So that we cannot have only a one-tiered approach, but have a comprehensive approach where all state programs that are looking towards energy efficiency and reducing our usage can work together with each other. We're also looking at integrated distribution and non-traditional renewable power sources into our grid. One of the places that I think we have to do some more work on is net metering. We do not have, at this point, in my opinion, we have an incentive program that incentivizes significantly the purchase of rooftop solar. Right now, if we look at our biggest utility provider, Entergy Louisiana, only 1% of their customers are participating in their net metering policy for solar. So we have to do some more work to ensure that Louisianians can access solar and net metering to reduce our dependence on other energy resources. We're also looking at distributed energy resources and aggregators and VPPs, how they can unlock the potential for low carbon energy sources that are already on the grid. We have seen the success of of community solar. We see the New Orleans City Council just recently revised their rules, considering doubling the compensation rate. And since our rules passed in 2019, I think it's imperative that we also look to ensure that the Commission's rules are also in line with the amount of investments that we're seeing here in the state today. We believe that it just needs more. And one of the other places that I think that is extremely important that your climate action plan talks about is the need for industry to decarbonize. So we have significantly been working on PPAs for industrial users. We are looking at ways how we can incentivize and work with big energy consumption. I mean, it is no lost fact that almost 60% of all energy consumed in the state of Louisiana comes from our industry users. And so looking at ways that they can buy their own cheap, clean power, cutting out the middleman of the utility and even feeding their excess power back onto the grid, I think is significantly important for the work. And so we are evaluating that currently. And also looking at, in our current docket about electric vehicles. How can we build strong rules that support the economic investment, look at particular barriers around charging to EV adoptions, and then potentially how we can use them as disruptive DERs that can act as generators for homes and virtual peak plants at times of high demand, both at applications to showcase representing a clean alternative to a carbon-intense energy usage. And so the Commission's very busy. I've tried to get caught up to speed. I was reminded this morning when I opened Facebook that today was actually the primary election day. So this, I guess, marks the 1 year of me kind of in this position. But I can say, at least for myself, and I do feel that I could speak for my colleagues, that we are significantly looking into this. We've opened recent dockets around nuclear and hydrogen as well. We're also, all three of us are off to our National Association of Utility Regulators conference this weekend, where we will be talking significantly about decarbonization as well as the advancement of nuclear and hydrogen in our state. And so I tell you all that to say that we, as the commission, recognize that a part of the work that you outline lies at our feet, and that the work that we do is important for us to meet our goals. And I can tell you, for myself and for my office, we will be committed to doing everything we can to enact your recommendations and propel Louisiana into the future. And so, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for your invitation. I also want to thank you for your leadership and coming before the commission a few months ago to present this plan into our meeting and into our record, so we, as we make decisions, can evaluate the work that you have done. And I want to thank each and every one of you for serving on this task force.
Well, thank you so much, Commissioner Lewis. Thank you for your partnership and leadership. It's really you were not joking when you said you had a lot to update with the PSC's activities, and so really looking forward, as we wind down this year and into 2024, I think we should all be, really engaging with the Public Service Commission and its, many dockets relevant to the Climate Action Plan and contents in there, and so. We've had a strong, healthy relationship of partnership and cooperation with Mr. Robertson serving as the Public Service Commission's representative, Executive Secretary Fry, many meetings. He served on our committees and advisory groups. And so I think the collaboration will hopefully continue for many years into the future and really breed a lot of great results for the state and the people of the state. So thank you for being here. Are there any questions from our task force members? If you're willing to
Absolutely
answer a few questions, thank you, Mr. Robertson.
Excuse me.
Okay, now you're good.
When I joined the staff at the PSC, I asked one of the elders there how long it took him to understand what goes on there. He said about 6 years. And I stayed 18 years, and I still don't understand everything that goes on there. So congratulations on your first anniversary.
Thank you.
And good luck with that learning curve.
It's ever bending, I'll tell you that.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Let's see. And Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Lewis, my name is Tyler Gray, and I don't know if we've had the chance to meet yet, but so I work for an industrial facility located here in Baton Rouge. And so prior to that, I actually represented the industry working for Louisiana Mid-Continent Oil and Gas Association, and prior to that, I actually worked for the Commissioner of Conservation. And so I have a very unique perspective of being able to share sort of what my perspective would be. And one of the reasons I love working for the company that I do now is that I get to do a lot in looking into where the market sits. And so my background is in economics, and I'm a junkie for it in general. And so we make primarily transportation fuels, and we run and use a lot of energy. And one of my responsibilities is looking into ways to do the things that you're talking about. And the reason I say that is because we provide about 1 in 4 gallons of transportation fuel in the state. We are a state, like a Louisiana company. And so what I will always say is that if folks want to pay $9 for a gallon of gas, we'll make it, right? And so when I look into how much power it takes from a solar standpoint at 500 acres to power those kind of facilities, it's difficult to figure out those solutions. And so I welcome the opportunity to work with you on how to sort of what are the stumbling blocks that I see, because right now it's technology, it's commercialization of that technology, and it makes it difficult. And so I look at it all the time. We track those things. It's something that as a company, employing people in the whole area, all different types, whether you're welding pipes, accountants, I'm a lawyer, all those things. And we all want the same thing. So it would be a wonderful opportunity to work through and say, hey, this is how we're trying to regulate it, and this is how we're trying to get the demand up for it, because that's another problem we have seen. We can make sustainable aviation fuel. No one will buy it. And that's sort of where we've struggled. So working together to be able to have that both sides would welcome that opportunity going forward.
Absolutely, I would appreciate that, and I welcome it too. I think that is the challenge from a regulator standpoint. I mean, I typically call the transition what I say a just transition. Partly what I mean by that is there is a risk. And I've often told some of my colleagues across the nation and developers that my people can't look at the yachts you're building when they're drowning, and so we can't get too focused on the new at the cost significantly of people. And in my position, I cannot change or put my people at risk financially to say, oh, I'm improving the health. And so there is a balance there. And I think there's a significant amount of work. So I do welcome future conversations, and my office is definitely open to sitting down and talking more.
Thank you, Commissioner. And to Mr. Gray's point, I mean, I think this is where there's a great opportunity, or many opportunities, with respect to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act that can help, we can help compete, or we can compete and bring down federal investment that can help kind of bridge the gap, so to speak, where the economics are not quite there yet, to avoid the burden on particularly low-income and disadvantaged communities, so that that burden doesn't disproportionately fall on them, but to kind of catalyze investment in new investment in low carbon investment. So a lot of opportunity to continue to work together to bring those federal dollars to bear.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the most important, especially as we talk about electrification. I want to ensure that if we are electrifying, we don't electrify too fast, because the people who would typically not benefit from the savings of electrification would be low income and disadvantaged communities. And so we can't, in one instance, in my view, do what we know is the best, but not in a just way, so we're not disproportionately hurting the same people we're asking to save.
Yes, indeed. Any other questions from our task force members? Seeing none. Well, thank you very much, Commissioner Lewis, for being here today. Really appreciate it. So moving next on our agenda, we have Commissioner Monique Edwards, the Commissioner of Conservation, and her colleagues at the Office of Conservation, Chris Sandoz and Carrie Weibelt, here to present on minimizing methane waste. And let me get all three of your microphones on. Up. Okay. Here we, yes,
I got it.
you got it.
Good afternoon. My name is Monique Edwards, and I've been serving as your Commissioner of Conservation since April 17th of this year. Needless to say, as I took on the task of in that role, I was met with the Climate Action Plan. Before I allow Carrie and Chris to give their remarks on what we're doing, I just want you to know that I am very excited about where we are as a state with the energy transition. As you go around the country and you hear what's going on in different places, there is no place in the United States of America that has all the components of the energy transition. Louisiana can be truly a leader in this space. And so the work that you've done on this commission sets the table for us to really take that on. The two things that the Department of Natural Resources through the Office of Conservation added to the Climate Action Plan was to deal with venting and flaring, the inactive wells, and as Governor Edwards indicated, we utilized the federal grants to plug orphan wells, mainly in North Louisiana, which was a significant undertaking. And so to give additional information on how we came about with these two things, I'll start with Carrie Weibelt, who is the Division Director for our Engineering Administrative Division.
Thank you, Commissioner. So we are in the process of amending our venting and flaring rules. The existing rule is silent as it relates to flaring, yet provides provisions for venting. Our proposed rule has 6 key points. It prohibits venting except in those instances where routine flaring is not a safe alternative, prohibits flaring from natural gas wells with exception to economic hardship based on specified criteria. It prohibits flaring from horizontal wells with exception to economic hardships based on specified criteria. Specifies that any flares must be established in a safe location. Requires any vented or flared volumes to be reported on our monthly production reports. And it requires all new permit to drill applicants to certify that in the event their new well produces natural gas, there's infrastructure to bring the natural gas to market. And if not, the applicant will shut in the well, evaluate if the well is a candidate for flaring based on economic hardship, or shall provide a gas capture plan. And we anticipate rule promulgation in January 2024.
Chris Sandos is the Division Director for our Engineering Regulatory, and he'll speak to the inactive well assessment as well as the federal program for the orphan wells.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Our inactive well rules were changed to expand the applicability and amount of inactive well assessments. Those changes were effective October 20th, 2023. Benefits of these amendments include incentivizing operators to either return wells to service or to permanently abandon them, and it increases revenue for restoring existing orphan wells. Both outcomes of these rule changes help us to reduce the number of orphan wells to ensure protection of the environment and public safety. Specific changes that we made include replacing the uniform annual $250 per well assessment with 3 tiers ranging from $125 to $500 per well based on well depth. We also increased the amount of each tier by 50% once a well has been inactive for more than 10 years. And finally, we replaced the schedule of abandonment assessment exemption with an assessment reduction based on the number of wells permanently abandoned in the preceding year. So that changes the focus to how many wells an operator say they're going to plug to how many they actually plugged. It's estimated that these changes will result in a revenue increase of approximately $1.3 million in fiscal year 25, with half of that increase dedicated to the Oilfield Site Restoration Fund. On the grant, the IIJA grant for orphan wells, as the governor alluded to, we plugged 636 wells across Louisiana, primarily in North Louisiana, this calendar year. And those, we also, with some of that money, let out a grant with LSU to measure the carbon or the methane that can be translated into carbon savings. We estimate we eliminated 383 metric tons of CO2 per year by plugging those wells. While the initial results showed those wells are not very high emitters, there's certainly evidence that there may be high emitters. We just need to find them. And so LSU is continuing efforts to do that. Thank you.
And we'll take any questions.
Thank you so much for your efforts and for moving forward on those rulemakings, and really, both the GHG reduction, the methane reduction is important. It's a potent greenhouse gas, but also there are some savings as well to the state, and so it's sort of this win-win opportunity. So thank you for your leadership, all 3 of you. Any questions from our task force members relative to the rulemakings or the orphan well program or plugging of abandoned wells or orphan wells?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm pushing the button or not.
Yep. Mr. Grandy.
I've got a question about the orphan well work. With that initial tranche of funding, has all of that been used, or is the plugging work continuing
Yes,
this
sir.
year?
All of the plugging work is complete. I think and all of the money has been spent. We're waiting, or we're working with the Department of Interior on the next tranche and the application process for that. We believe we're well positioned to access all available dollars to Louisiana, especially by the performance that we had this past year. We really did a lot of good work. They're very complimentary.
Thank you.
And what was that top line number? 600 some odd wells?
636 wells. Oh, yeah, and I forgot to mention the total cost. We had a $25 million grant to DNR, and then we actually spent money that was dedicated to U.S. Fish and Wildlife. We spent another $12.6 million of their money to plug wells in Louisiana on lands they manage.
Excellent. Well, I would say money well spent, and thank you for overseeing that implementation of those funds. And again, thank you for being here and briefing the task force and the public on all the great work going on at the Office of Conservation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Up next on our agenda, we'll have an update from Jeanette DeBibben with the Center for Planning Excellence on the Power Up Louisiana initiative. Sure, Mr. Robertson.
Is it possible that the task force could distribute written copies of these remarks we've heard this afternoon to the members of the task force, Governor Edwards, Commissioner Edwards, and Commissioner Lewis?
We can see about doing that. It's all being recorded, so it's all, you can watch the video. The video is available and will be posted on the legislature's website. So it will be available for consumption. We'll see kind of the writing down of the remarks and get back to you on that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. Ms. DeBibben.
Hi, good afternoon, task force members. My name is Jeanette DeBibben. I'm with the Center for Planning Excellence, and I am here on behalf of your fellow task force member, Camille Manning-Broom, who is actually doing some Power Up stuff that I'm going to be talking about just a little bit. Do you see? There's a presentation. I don't know how to pull that up.
Yes. There we go.
Thank you. All right, so we have been busy. You can see over the last couple of years, this is just an overview and my personal note of showing you a video at the end. There will be a video at the end that's very short and informative. Over the last couple of years, we have worked on assisting local governments with implementing and supporting, doing actions that support the Climate Action Plan at the local level. And so, for instance, we worked with the City of Gonzales on developing their own Climate Action and Resilience Plan. It is available online, and the City of Gonzales has been presenting on that Climate Action Plan throughout the city, because although the city is a small in its footprint, and know that they can't make a big dent in our overall carbon footprint for the state, just simply talking about it and leading by example is a step in the right direction. You can see they did a carbon footprint analysis, and it was determined that vehicular emissions are one of their main emissions, unlike the states. So I just wanted to point that out because I think the more local communities are going to be doing their own carbon footprint analyses and greenhouse gas inventories, they're going to find different sectors that their emissions are falling into, and collectively we can move the needle on the overall emission reduction. All right, CPEX has also been working with partners on these weatherization events. These are primarily aimed at providing eligible applicants with technical assistance to apply to the Louisiana Housing Corporation's weatherization application program that, like the name says, weatherizes homes, making them more energy efficient and just tightening up the building and preparing them for any kind of renewable energy installations if that's desired. And so we've held 3 in Scotlandville, 1 in St. Gabriel, and 1 in Alexandria to date, and we are planning on doing more of those. We're also working with the state on developing a comprehensive wind roadmap. As you all know, the offshore wind leases were out for bid, and a bid was won by RWE, I believe. And so as that investment is going into the Gulf of Mexico, right in our front door in the Lake Charles and Cameron Parish area, we are partnering with the state to develop this wind roadmap to ensure that supply chain, workforce benefits, community benefits, and all the things that come with a new industry coming into the state can benefit the state and its residents. And I believe the RFP was released yesterday. I mean, the RFI, I'm sorry, RFI. We have also, with a advisory committee, developed a model solar toolkit. And while this toolkit is in its final phases of being completed, we are planning on having roundtables to tailor the toolkit recommendations to local conditions in the Acadiana region. And what this model solar toolkit aims to do is provide land use guidance for local governments to help developers figure out how they can invest, for instance, in solar, and what the conditions for that investment are locally in their communities. So it is a tool to learn how to apply regulations that we bring out as a model at the local level, because as we know, every community is unique in Louisiana. And then, gosh, we have done a lot. So we have been working with the Baton Rouge Area Foundation through a partnership to develop the Louisiana Clean Energy Fund, and that is a green bank for the state of Louisiana, and the first application to support energy investments or projects in Louisiana has gone to the Solar for All program, which aims to weatherize and put solar to up to 15,000 low to moderate income households in the state of Louisiana. And we developed around all of this work an initiative that aims at peer-to-peer learning tours to see what it is that we're talking about. We have educational webinars, and we're drafting policy papers and developing an advocacy strategy. And we have already begun this work. The peer-to-peer facilitation, for instance, last year or earlier this year, I believe in January, we asked then Representative John Zoka of North Carolina to come to speak to our representatives here in the state about his experience with the wind and solar, or renewable energy in general, and the rules and regulations that come with it, the laws that are made or not made, and the Entergy of the Carolinas partnership in that role. And this is a video that I wanted to share with you about Power Up, because I hope that some of you or all of you will be part of it sooner or later.
Introducing Power Up Louisiana. Led by the Center for Planning Excellence, Power Up Louisiana aligns elected officials, government decision makers, energy experts, nonprofits, and community leaders, all to advance discussion on renewable energy policy and planning for our state. Our efforts include peer-to-peer learning facilitation, wind and solar tours, educational webinars, and plan and policy development. We strive to cultivate a comprehensive understanding of how Louisiana's communities and economies can benefit from renewable energy investments. The timing is critical for Louisiana to diversify its energy economy and include renewables in its trajectory. The offshore wind sector represents the fastest growing energy industry globally, with substantial capital influx. Capturing even a fraction of this market could inject billions into Louisiana's economy, creating jobs, developing a domestic supply chain, and leveraging our offshore wind potential. Power Up Louisiana is more than a mere movement. It's a comprehensive strategy aimed at uniting and redefining our energy future. The future is indeed promising, and it commences with our unified efforts. Join Power Up Louisiana and be part of the progress to come. Okay, and one last plug.
speaking about workforce, we also have 2 job announcements out for working on the Power Up initiative today. So thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Bibbin. I had the pleasure of going to Block Island just a few months ago to check out the offshore wind farm, the nation's first offshore wind farm, largely constructed, fabricated, engineered, designed, and installed by companies based in Louisiana. So I think the power of actually seeing that it's real, it's more than just a pretty picture on a page or a word, and that, it equals jobs and opportunity, I think really has a powerful effect. So thank you for sharing on that effort, and I'll open up to our task force members if they have any questions. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item is an update on the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act by our state's infrastructure coordinator, Jackson Wright, with the governor's office. Do you have a PowerPoint? Okay, let's. There we go.
I don't have any videos in mind.
That's okay. You can be animated as you give your presentation.
Also, the governor and Commissioner Lewis kind of did the presentation for me anyway, so I'll go quickly. All right, I think we got it now.
All right, let's see. All right, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the task force for having me today. As Harry mentioned, I'm Jackson Wright, Director of Special Projects in the Governor's Office. One of the special projects is serving as the State Infrastructure Coordinator for the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. And basically, I spend a lot of time coordinating across the state agencies with local governments and liaising with the team at the White House and the federal agencies who are charged with implementing the various 380 plus programs in the BIL and the many programs in the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA. And so I won't spend a lot of time talking about the 2 acts. They represent, as the governor mentioned, a tremendous opportunity for the state across a lot of sectors, and especially those opportunities that relate to the Climate Action Plan. And actually, next week, I'll just mention, next week is the on the 15th, the 2-year anniversary of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. It's been about a year that the Inflation Reduction Act has been in place. So some of the priorities that the state has for both of these range from broadband to EVs, renewables, grid resilience, orphan wells, many of the things you've heard discussed today. And across all of those priorities, the governor has charged all of us with maximizing funding, so making sure we get as much as we can from these opportunities, as well as advancing the Climate Action Plan, which is most relevant to this group. And so in a few slides, I'll talk about some of the more large accomplishments with respect to the Climate Action Plan, and also some anticipated announcements between now and hopefully the end of the year. 2 other priorities worth mentioning that the governor has really stressed is supporting local governments who may need assistance, technical assistance, or financial support, and meeting non-federal match requirements for these opportunities that they can apply directly for, as well as making sure that we're generating good jobs for Louisianans through taking full advantage of this opportunity. So moving forward, just recapping where we are. This is as of a couple weeks ago, and so there have been a few announcements recently, but the numbers pretty much are around this amount, and this is from our website, infrastructure.la.gov, but it's over $9 billion that's been announced. There's anticipated more that will be announced through formula funds and also through some hopefully discretionary awards over the next few years. And the breakdown of that 9.1 billion, you can see here, and I'll just call out, some of this has already been mentioned today, but you can see we've got over 1.2 billion related to clean energy in the power grid, 164 million for EVs, the same for environmental remediation, and 202 million for public transportation. So digging into a little more specifically, and this is small text, so I will read these for those who are not able to see it. So these are some selected cap-related announced funds, since the last 2 years, and these are basically anything that was over 20 million. There have been a lot of awards that are not listed here that are related to the Climate Action Plan, but I didn't want to spend too long talking about them. So just giving a highlight of the bigger ones. We had the $600 million award for Project Cypress through the Regional Direct Air Capture Hub program. We had $250 million through the Department of Energy's Grid Resilience and Innovation Program to DNR. And I'm going to talk about that program known as the HERO program on my last slide. There was also an award to Entergy New Orleans for grid hardening and microgrids of $55 million. So this, Louisiana, this was one where we really succeeded nationally on this program, this Department of Energy program. The next bullet, the $212 million in funds, was mentioned earlier. I think Commissioner Lewis talked about it. This is the IRA home energy rebate programs. There's $212 million that will be implemented by DNR over the next few years, and it's a very exciting opportunity there. We have $320 million to the private sector, two companies, two different awards through the Battery Materials Processing Grant Program, which the governor alluded to. There was the, on the passenger rail side of things, there was the $178 million, and this was not strictly to Louisiana, but $178 million, what's called CRISI, Consolidated Rail Infrastructure Safety Improvement Program. Thank you. It was for the New Orleans to Mobile rail corridor and passenger rail. We talked about plugging of orphan wells. This, the folks from the Office of Conservation mentioned that the numbers that were the initial grant, and as well as some work that they were doing with Fish and Wildlife, the 60 million here takes into account the formula funds, kind of that next phase that they anticipate working out soon with Department of Interior. So we should see more wells continue to be plugged, and really applaud them for the work they've done so far in that over 600 number you've heard a couple times. On the resilience side, 50 million this is the first time anyone in Louisiana had received a nationally competitive award from the BRIC program, FEMA's Building Resilient Infrastructure Communities. So there were two awards there in Terrebonne and Jefferson Parish, respectively. You also had the Clean School Bus program, which there's a rebate program and a grant program. The rebate program, the next round of that is open now, so I would encourage school systems to take a look at that. It's a fairly straightforward process, but in the last round, we had $43 million in rebates awarded to school systems across the state. Here on the public transportation side, you had large awards to New Orleans RTA for the low or no emissions bus grant, $71 million, as well as a $25 million RAISE grant award to RTA. There on the urban and community forestry, this is a very exciting program about building trees and increasing the tree cover and all the benefits that provides in urban settings and in the community. And so we had 24 million that were awarded across those different recipients, New Orleans, Lake Charles, Baton Rouge, and Southern, for that grant program. We also saw 21 million to the Magnolia Sequestration Hub via the Carbon Safe program for a project in Allen Parish. And finally, 20 million in a RAISE award from fiscal year 22 to Baton Rouge and Gonzales for passenger rail stations. So a lot of activity. These are highlights, but I did want to acknowledge the work that's happened so far and the efforts and the rewards that we've seen in the last couple of years. Some things on the horizon. So this has been mentioned already. This should say DNR is requesting $250 million for residential and community solar. It's a typo. But that's Solar for All, and EPA has anticipated that they announce their selection sometime in the spring of next year. Soon, DOTD will issue an RFP for the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. As well, DNR will issue an RFP for the 40101D Grid Resilience Program, which is a formula program that the state is administering that is somewhat similar in concept to the HERO program, but will be is administered by the state and will be competitive for those sub-grantees. So hopefully we'll see. We had an RFI that went out about that, so you can find more information if you're curious, but the RFP should be out soon. And then I mentioned this already, but awards for the Clean School Bus Grant Program should be coming out in the coming months. I know we had a few applications from various entities across Louisiana. And also, U.S. Department of Transportation should be announcing, they recently announced selections for their the Northeast corridor for this program, but for the rest of the country, we should see hopefully some announcements soon in the coming months. And I know Louisiana is involved in a few different areas there with that grant program. And then this is something that I didn't mention on the first page, but I just wanted to flag. I know broadband is somewhat tangential to the Climate Action Plan, but there's $1.3 billion in what's called BEAD funding, broadband equity access and deployment, for the deployment of broadband infrastructure and also making sure it's affordable to folks. We are anticipating approval from the Federal Administrating Agency, NTIA, for our what's called BEAD initial proposal, but our plan, basically, and we would be the first state to have that approval and be able to begin implementing that very large program. So anticipate that coming in the next weeks, months. Also wanted to just plug here, this is on our website. If you go to infrastructure.la.gov and you scroll down to the dashboard, there's a link where you can see what we're calling a map of progress. It is a, there's a big disclaimer when you open it, but it's intended to give you a sense of the progress. It's not covering every single thing that's happening to the moment that you're seeing it. It is updated regularly, but it lags behind what actually is happening. Some of the things you see here are obligated funds for transportation projects. Other things that you see are awards that were announced to particular locations. So it's a mixture of things that you can see on here. You can click around and filter it and see just where this work is happening or will be happening across the state. And then I'll spend a little bit of time talking about the HERO program. Text is very small, but these slides probably will be shared, maybe can be. I'm happy with that. So the HERO program is Hubs for Resilient Energy Operations. The state received $250 million. That's spelled wrong. Yeah, it's not Hubs for. Anyway, got it wrong on there. But HERO, it somehow turns into HERO. Apologies. So the award, though, the exciting part is $250 million in federal investment. The total investment with the match is about $500 million for this program, and it will be the goal is to create the 385 resilient community-based hubs that basically provide resilience to those communities that are hard hit that have by hurricanes and other disasters that cause power outages, as well as ensuring there's resilience on hurricane evacuation routes. There is a lot of partners on this. People worked extremely hard to put this together. I'm very proud of the accomplishments here, and really excited to see how this program continues over the coming years as they go into the planning phases and the pilot and start to do the statewide rollout. And making sure that also, I'll just mention with the community benefits in mind, that's a really important part of this program, ensuring that those benefits are going toward those disadvantaged communities as well as providing meaningful workforce opportunities. I think that's my last slide here. So I'm happy to take questions. Oh no, there's one more. Great. So this is the last thing I'll mention, just a plug. I mentioned the website. You can also sign up for our newsletter on the website. We send out right now it's a weekly newsletter. that goes out, talks about the different opportunities and updates. If you want to keep track of all the various things that are happening with the infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. Thank you.
Well, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Wright. Really appreciate all of your work, herding cats and making sure that everybody's aware of the opportunities that are coming kind of fast and furious from the federal government. It feels like every week there's a new set of new opportunities to track and new deadlines to hit to put together applications. And so just consistent with the governor's message of compete for everything you can compete for. Really appreciate your work in coordinating all these efforts. Do we have any questions from our task force members? Mr. Lambert.
Yeah, Harry, I just wanted to also publicly thank Jackson for his work again for keeping us on track and trying to meet all your information requirements. But really do appreciate your work and your cooperation and collaboration.
Thanks, Brad.
And Mr. Grandy?
Yep, Jackson, I'll echo that also, and a special thanks for making us aware of opportunities that were coming out, deadlines that were coming up, and the workshop and the training that you provided for state agencies. I know it probably helped make the HERO grant and a number of those other grants better. So thank you for your hard work on this, and the scorecard up there. A lot of really good work that's going to be going on in the next couple of years and beyond across the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grandy. The board is clear currently, so thank you, Mr. Wright.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda, really wanted to just open the floor to our task force members. I know we've heard a lot of what's going on in the state of Louisiana relative to implementation of the Climate Action Plan, but wanted to open it up to see if any of our task force members had anything they wanted to share with the group and the audience today. Mr. Monroe, and just because it's a new system, it's the button on the left, I believe. But yes, it's green now,
Okay.
and when it's green.
Got it.
Yeah.
They usually don't let me speak at these things, so thank you for the help there, Harry. And I want to echo what was said earlier about Jackson's work and really this whole administration. And before I start, I'm Zach Monroe with the City of New Orleans. This administration has been such a big help for the city, especially around securing these federal funds. And I know a lot of the folks that work on this are in here today, so I want to make sure I thank them. Harry, thank you for all your work. Greg, you and your staff at CPRA. Charles Sutcliffe, I see in the back there hiding. I think I saw Lindsay Cooper earlier, who got the ball rolling on the HEROES project, so I want to make sure that got mentioned as well. Isabel coming in here and helping out at the end of the term, and of course Jackson, who hears from the city probably more often than he would like to, but he's always courteous and helpful. So thank you so much. You still owe me a letter of support for a grant next week, so put that on your to-do list. Yeah, we punch above our weight around federal awards, and that's not an accident. So just great work by this entire administration. A couple big awards for the city that I want to mention. A lot of these got mentioned earlier, but of course the HERO Award, the city is a member of that, and we'll be able to put up some solar and backup storage, energy storage on critical city facilities. And the Entergy New Orleans grant is going to have some workforce development components that the city is going to be a part of as well. The city was also awarded about 2 months ago an EPA Swiffer grant, so we'll be deploying 83,000 new residential recycling carts across the city, so that every eligible household within the city of New Orleans will have a residential recycling bin. That was, again, a $4 million award from EPA. Jackson mentioned the Urban and Community Forestry program. The city was awarded $8 million, so we'll be planting trees in underserved areas with low tree canopy coverage. And finally, I want to mention the EDA Tech Hubs designation. So it was the Advanced Manufacturing, the National Center for Advanced Manufacturing was the lead applicant, but with a large amount of partners. And we were one of 31 designated tech hubs by the Economic Development Administration. It's a program to drive regional innovation and job creation and make us globally competitive. And our application was around offshore wind. Harry, I think you worked on that as well, if there's anything you want to fill in on that.
Yes, so the Economic Development Administration designated a handful of applications as tech hubs. Louisiana is the only one that submitted one relative to offshore wind. We're very bullish on offshore wind and its potential not only to play a role in the supply chain for projects on the East Coast and West Coast and elsewhere, but in the Gulf of Mexico as well. There are several engineering challenges and technical challenges that need to be worked through in order to get to wind turbines in the Gulf, and those are primarily we have a lower wind speed compared to kind of the East Coast or West Coast or the North Sea, and then we also have hurricanes and very intense hurricanes at times, and so the hurricane resilience piece is something that needs to be kind of improved upon. And so the idea of this tech hub, which is a consortium that's being led by LSU, is to kind of get a few test turbines in the water near Port Fourchon, and really start doing research and development and create new intellectual property, create new technology to address those issues as well as others. Because once you have you're in the Gulf of Mexico testing new blades and hurricane resilience, you can also test impacts on bird species, for example, and develop new technologies in mitigating and avoiding impacts to birds and other species, so that we kind of don't create another issue as we're trying to solve one issue. So it's a great opportunity. Louisiana's been designated, but and we've been invited to submit a Phase 2 application in which the state, through this consortium, could receive $50 to $75 million to implement and get those turbines out in the water to get the research center up and running. And so that application is due at the end of February, so just a few months away. It's a very exciting opportunity with many of our state universities, technical colleges, private industry, Water Institute of the Gulf. This is a nice, really broad-based consortium that is part of that effort. So very exciting on that front. Any other updates from our task force members? Yes, Dr. Springer.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Abby Springer, and I work for the Department of Natural Resources, but specifically for the State Energy Office. And our office has been mentioned several times today, and also have our two biggest programs, the HERO program and the HOMES program. So I won't bog you down with all the details again, because you've already heard them. But just to give you some of the details of where we're at. So in the HERO program, when we received this grant, it was actually the third highest funding for this grant, and it was a highly competitive grant. So we're really proud of getting that. So let's see, the funding for this program was $250 million over a 5 to 8 year span, and there is a matching cost share on that. But we began the funding negotiations with DOE on October 17th. This process could take up to 120 days, so we're hoping that funding will roll in soon. So right now, we are working with contractors as they construct how all of these moving parts of the program will be implemented. We talked about the hubs and other items that all have to come together for this. So the vast requirements of this program will require our contractors to work with subcontractors to bring this together. But the Energy Office will mainly work on overseeing the program and managing all the reporting and DOE contacts and things like that. Then we had the HOMES program that's been mentioned a few times. So the DOE issued the guidance on the application in July, And so right now, we have received our early administration funds, the combined grants, because there's 2 grants within this program. And it totals $250 million, and we received that in September. These initial funds are being used to develop our in-house RFP to acquire a contractor that will be tasked to complete the application process, which is due in January of 2025, and to begin building the first phase of this program. So we're looking forward to getting some bids back from our RFP and getting this program off the ground.
Thank you very much for that update, Dr. Springer. Ms. Gautreaux. Oh, I had you. I got you.
Okay.
All right.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So I've updated this group a few times about the Louisiana Outdoor Forever program, and I'm very pleased that we have members on the project selection board and technical advisory board. And this effort started about 7 years ago and culminated in legislation that gave our state dedicated conservation funding. And I'm really excited that a couple of weeks ago, the Project Selection Board approved 13 projects around the state that have various conservation values that impact climate on multiple levels, but we leveraged $10 million worth of state funding to $37 million. So it's a start, but I know many of the people in the room were part of that process, and we're hoping on building that program from this point on. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Ms. Gautreaux, for that update. And Mr. Grandy?
So a couple of notes. Last month, we were notified by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation that we received a grant through the National Coastal Resilience Fund to supersize a marsh creation project right on the edge of St. Bernard and Plaquemines Parish, just east of Delacroix. So that project is moving forward. We anticipate going to bid next year. We also submitted 3 letters of intent to NOAA's National Climate Resilience Grant, 2 of which were notified that we were invited to submit a full proposal. So this grant program has about $550 million available for all of the states. There were over 900 proposals that were submitted. Only 50 of those were selected to move forward to submit a full proposal. Those 900 proposals, the total is about $15 billion that were requested. So our projects, we're putting those proposals together. They're due in February of next year. There's 2 areas that we're looking at: Terrebonne, Lafourche with resilience projects, and then Orleans, Jefferson, St. Charles, and St. John parishes. So Zach, I'll be contacting you about a letter of support very soon. So put that on your to-do list. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grandy, for that update. Not seeing any other updates from our task force members, we'll move right along to agenda item number 5, presentation from Ms. Lakeisha Hart from the Division of Administration, who heads up the Office of State Planning, and Isabel Engelhardt from Office of the Governor regarding the EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, and they'll be overviewing the Priority Climate Action Plan that they've been developing. Let's see, let me get your microphones on, and is your presentation up?
Thank you. Good afternoon, task force members. Appreciate the opportunities to come and give you guys an update on where we stand with the Priority Climate Action Plan and more generally with the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant opportunity. My name is Lakeisha Hart. I am the State Planning Manager with the Office of Planning and Budget. Just a short overview of what we'll be talking about today. We'll give you a grant overview, then we'll discuss our Priority Climate Action Plan development process. Then we'll give you some details about our actual priority actions, and then we'll discuss next steps in looking ahead. So the Division of Administration was selected to administer an EPA Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, and basically it is a planning grant which was given to Louisiana, and it's 2 stages for the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. The first stage is the $3 million that went to the division, And the purpose of the $3 million grant is to develop a priority climate action plan, a comprehensive climate action plan, and then a status report. The goal of the grant is to produce implementation measures that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and other harmful air pollutants. So stage one is what we're in now. That's the planning effort. And so that would hopefully set Louisiana up for stage two, which is where we see the actual efforts of, results of all of our efforts come to fruition, which is a implementation grant. And so EPA, through the competitive grant, is making available $4.6 billion. It's a national competition. That will be available in awards between $2 and $50 million in a general pot, and then there's a tribal set aside of between $1 and $25 million in grants. The caveat to the competitive grant is that the implementation measures that are outlined in the competitive grant applications must align with a priority climate action plan, which is what we are developing right now. In addition to Louisiana as a state getting a non-competitive planning grant, the two MSAs in Louisiana, New Orleans and Baton Rouge, also received $1 million apiece to do planning grants. And so there will ultimately be 3 priority climate action plans coming out of this effort, one at the state scale and then one at the regional scale. The competitive grant applications are due actually with the amazing federal government and their timing of things. They are due April 1st of 2024, which, as you all see with our timeline as we go forward, the reason that we are expediting our process, which ultimately is to get a priority climate action plan finished by the end of this year, is so that we enable as much time as possible for our potential applicants for the implementation grants to put together an application to get that submitted by April of next year, since their implementation grants have to align with the actions that we will outline in our priority climate action plan. And so again, I think talking about high level what the priorities that EPA set out in its notification of funding availability, they wanted us to develop a plan that ultimately reduces greenhouse gas emissions and other harmful air pollutants, that empowers community-driven solutions in overburdened communities, creates good jobs, addresses environmental injustices, and lowers energy costs. So on the implementation grant side, the eligible entities are states, municipalities, air pollution control agencies, tribes, and then groups of one or more of these entities. And I just want to flag for any potential applicants, one of the requirements of the implementation grant, if folks are looking at kind of joining together to come together in a consortium of entities, is that an MOU must be established prior to application submittal. And so I think as we see oftentimes in grant opportunities, it's more competitive if we partner and bring together multiple entities across different sectors of government and public and private. And so for this particular grant, though, it's only open to the public entities. But the caveat I want to say is that those conversations and thoughts need to be happening now, because all of those agreements need to be in place prior to the application being submitted. So next I'll go into really the process that we went through to get to where we are now, and then kind of looking forward to finalizing our priority climate action plan. First of all, because of all of the work that you all have done over the last several years, we did not have to start from scratch. We started with the Louisiana Climate Action Plan, and with all of the work that you all have done, we, from the Climate Action Plan, developed through a process of outreach and stakeholder engagement, developed a priority focus areas, So our engagement included community engagement, stakeholder engagement, and also the intergovernmental coordination. And the output of all of our efforts will produce what EPA requires and what we as a state need. Community-driven solutions that support the creation of good jobs, address environmental injustice in overburdened areas, and also out of that process, our priorities will be near-term, high-priority implementation-ready measures that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and other harmful air pollutants. So the timeline, we actually received an award officially on paper from EPA in July of this year. And so in August, we convened the Climate Task Force for the first meeting where we had a public meeting where we workshopped getting from the current Louisiana Climate Action Plan to developing priority focus areas. And so that happened in August. And so between September and October, we have been working feverishly to engage the public. So we have had public meetings across the state, and you'll see a little bit more detail later. We've done interviews with local governments. We have engaged subject matter experts. We have met with our MSAs, and we have engaged focus groups to really, like I said earlier, try to identify those near-term, high-priority, implementation-ready actions to include in our PCAP. And so here we are now, today in November, meeting with you guys again, kind of giving you an update of where we are. And our goal is to submit our PCAP for public comment in a week or so. And then with the thought to finalize and have that plan submitted to EPA at the end of the year, early January at the latest. So this is just some outputs from when we convened with the first Climate Task Force meeting to discuss the priority plan. We did some workshopping to really get from the Climate Action Plan to our priority focus areas. Just a list of where we are today with our priority focus areas, really looking at from our perspective as a state, since this plan will cover an opportunity for municipalities and parishes and local jurisdictions to apply for implementation funding, we really wanted to be as broad as possible in our focus areas because what we knew kind of going in and confirmed after we had all of our meetings, every part of the state is different as far as what they need, what their priorities are. And so from what we heard in North Louisiana to what we heard in the river parishes and to what we heard in Southwest Louisiana, we hope that these priority focus areas really are broad enough to, one, get at the most significant contributions to our greenhouse gas emissions, but also be broad enough to provide opportunities for people with other innovative projects to be able to apply for some of these funds, and then also looking at how we can stack funding with all of the other federal opportunities that are available through IIJA and IRA. So, of course, we started with state agency coordination. This is just a snapshot of the state agencies that have been involved in this process. And through several different venues, whether it's already established working groups that have been doing the work collaboratively in other efforts. We didn't recreate the wheel there, and so where they were, for example, there's a grid working group already established that's working through all of the potential coordination points for IIJA and IRA funding that's coming in through the State Energy Office. There's a resilience working group with Charles, the Chief Resilience Officer, and the work that he's doing. And so we just kind of piggyback, thank you all, on those working groups to really bring together the state agency coordination piece. And then where there were some agencies that were not necessarily a part of those already established working groups, we met with them on an individual basis. And of course, always love when we get to partner with the Public Service Commission. So they have been, excuse me, an integral part of this process as well. A little bit, moving on next to the efforts that we went through for local, regional, and also tribal government engagement. We actually did individual interviews with local governments, some parishes, some cities specifically, and we also engaged with the federally recognized tribes in the state of Louisiana, since they have a specific set aside for the implementation grant. We really wanted to make sure that the priorities that they wanted to see move forward in their communities were addressed in our priority climate action plan. I'll just flag here the little circles and the graphics really are the opportunities that we saw and heard most about from all of our interviews, and those are solar, community hubs, urban forestry, and then the little buses fleet transition. So those really are what we heard kind of rise to the top as far as what the local governments and tribes really wanted to try to move forward in this climate resilience space. So we got the integration of input from the public sector in this process, but we also did engage focus groups, which were really targeted conversations to get input from subject matter experts across all of these focus areas to say, okay, here are our priorities. And as we think about putting metrics to quantifying greenhouse gas reductions or quantifying kind of where we need to be as far as prioritizing potential project work, what makes sense when you look through the lens of it's great to, want the Cadillac, but maybe we need to start with a Ford F-150. I haven't bought a car in a while, so the Ford F-150 might be more expensive. But I think we really wanted to really ground truth what we wanted to accomplish, looking at across community benefits and all of that, but also what was economically feasible, what was from a public entities perspective, just we can electrify 10% of our fleet. We can't do 50. And so we really wanted to, like I said, ground truth some of the ambitious thoughts that we had kind of going into that process. And so that was the purpose of the focus groups. And then we did have, well, we didn't bring together focus groups. We had targeted conversations, for example, with industry. We didn't bring a lot of industry partners together on a Zoom call. We met with a lot of them on an individual basis to discuss kind of what their priorities were and what they, any input that they had on our priority measures. So these focus groups were all virtual, and so this kind of really outlines the process that we went through. We set the stage, or we were focusing on near-term actions, and so while we in climate action planning are looking out into the further out into the future, we really wanted to capture those things in the more near term. And so we talked through with them what obstacles and challenges they saw in the various focus areas, specific first steps that we should be looking at taking when we think about implementation of those near-term actions, what we could do right now to kind of jumpstart some of these more challenging areas, or where there are technological, just gaps. What could we do kind of now at the state level to try to incentivize some of these things and moving forward? We also discussed, of course, the equity piece and how we could ensure that we are not exacerbating the issues that are already being experienced by our overburdened communities. And then we talked through opportunities for sustainability and scalability. So the focus groups, like I said, were really helping us to just ground truth our priorities. We also went through a community outreach process to see what the public felt like they wanted to see, both from a priority and implementation standpoint, but also a benefit standpoint, how they saw our greenhouse gas reduction measures, and how our priority measures would directly provide benefits to them. So we held 3 community meetings, and as you can see, we were very targeted in the selections that we did make for where we held our meetings. The circles on the map are where there are point sources for greenhouse gas emissions, and then the stars are where we held our meetings. And so we were very specifically trying to meet in the areas where we that experience the highest greenhouse gas emissions. And then in West Louisiana, they also have higher particulate matter challenges there as well. And so I think the thing that came out of the Northwest meeting, which I think we'll see in a few slides, is while in the South, the highest issue that they experienced and the highest concern to them was air pollution. I think it was a little bit different in the North, and I think you can see by the greenhouse gas emission differences in those areas, like there are reasons for that. I do want to give a quick shout out. There were a couple of boots on the ground public, nonprofits and community groups that really helped us bring all of this together. In the river parishes, Rise St. James, Concerned Citizens of St. John, and the Descendants Project. I also want to acknowledge Taproot Earth and Southwest Louisiana Community Foundation. Those groups really were instrumental in getting the word out, bringing people out, and just providing input and thought. They took time out of their evenings to come and have conversations with us, and so I did want to acknowledge that and express my appreciation. So the focus of the community groups, and I'll try to be brief, what we really wanted to get from them was what their greatest challenges were, where they saw the biggest issues when it came to this space. We also wanted to talk through things that they would like to see happen in their community in the near term, what their greatest concerns were related to climate change, and how the state could really ensure that equity was threaded throughout these processes, and how to ensure that it was, we prioritize equity, especially in those most overburdened communities. This is a slide I was hoping to get to, but really the output of that is what we really heard in the river parishes in Southwest Louisiana specifically was air quality and public health improvement were seen as the highest benefit to them. And then in Northwest Louisiana, it was increased climate resilience, and the blue shades always get me. But it's interesting to see how Louisiana varies from one place to another. And so, again, that really highlights why we've tried to be as broad as possible in our focus areas, because the challenges that some of the entities in one part of the state experience are markedly different than other areas. I think I am done. I'm going to turn it over to Isabel. Thank you.
Hopefully you're not done. I think I'm going to bring you in later. But yeah, thank you so much. I'm Isabel Engelhardt. I am a policy advisor in the Governor's Coastal Activities Office, and I'm happy to preview with you today the culmination of all of those efforts that Lakeisha just described that will make up our Priority Climate Action Plan, which is going out as a draft for public comment next week. So we're going to go through this focus area by focus area, and I'll pause. I think the best way to do it is to pause after each focus area. Some of them are a couple slides.
But we really do want your input, whether it's today or, you know, a follow-up afterwards. But this is grounded in the climate action plan that you were all instrumental in putting together, and also really we hope is kind of setting the stage for what climate action is going to look like in the future. And so, you know, your input on this is instrumental, especially because several of you are potentially, you know, important implementation grant applicants as well. Briefly, I want to point out kind of what we have up here on the slides. So at the top right, community solar, that is, you know, a focus area. Like I said, a lot of these are derived from what the climate action plan called sections, but they are not one-to-one. But this is how we broke it down for the priority climate action plan. That box over to the left there is an output. What you won't see on these slides is kind of a greenhouse gas reduction goal. We will be quantifying all of the greenhouse gas reductions that we project to come out of these actions for the priority climate action plan. That is a requirement from EPA. But I think with the climate action plan, there were a lot of instances where we were really setting those goals and then working down. And with this, we were trying to build really a robust implementation matrix. And so we were kind of more so working from the bottom up of identifying where those near-term high priority implementation ready actions are, you know, trying to figure out what are those potential outputs that those actions could actually produce, quantifying the greenhouse gas reduction emissions from those, comparing that to the goals that we had set, and then looking back, because if they weren't really getting us on track to the goals that we had put in the climate action plan, then we were looking at, well, what are the barriers, you know, what additional actions could we maybe put in here? And so that's what this really is here. We'll have the actions on the right there, those are the bullet points, and those are really what will be eligible for implementation grants, hopefully broad enough that, you know, a state agency, a group of state agencies, but also any of those other implementation applicants could hopefully apply for something. So with that, like I said, the first focus area is community solar. The output is support development of 500 megawatts of community solar statewide by 2030, with 255 megawatts for City of New Orleans electric customers. This is derived from the Solar for All application, and part of that is because a big part of this CPRG grant and making ourselves more competitive is showing where we're leveraging those other opportunities that Jackson and the governor and you know, that we've all been talking about this entire time. So Solar for All was a big part of how we crafted this focus area. And then the actions themselves would be to improve the metering rate for community solar billing, develop loan products to simplify financing, incentivize community solar projects that provide at least 20% electricity bill savings for low-income households, establish a community solar working group to address regulatory, bureaucratic, and procedural obstacles, leverage schools as anchor and host sites, and coordinate outreach through trusted local entities to support residential customer subscriptions. That's all I have on community solar. Like I said, I kind of want to pause. I know we want to keep moving through it, of course, but
any questions from our task force members? And just a reminder, you know, we'll have this out for public comment. But no, now is a good opportunity.
Question for you. You know, if you're going to use schools and such as the host sites for this, who's going to own and maintain the solar panels and the equipment?
I think that there are, you know, some provisions on that in the Solar for All application, and there would be more details there. But maybe that's something that you know, we need to make sure that we're really specifying if that's something that we're concerned about.
Yeah, it's an issue that has to be dealt with, and then if you're going to, you know, pump that energy back into the grid, the electric company has to buy it back from you, and then you're going to then allocate that to people that qualify based on their income status that are in that area to lower their electric bills? Is that how that's going to work?
I think the subscriptions happen on the front end, and part of that coordinated outreach is trying to get more of those subscriptions to lower income families, households, and so hopefully those benefits, like you're describing, yes, are reaching kind of our more energy burdened households.
Okay.
Uh,
Am I on? Yeah.
Professor Burchick.
Yeah, my name's Rob Burchick. Great presentation. My question is, so many of the things that are even on this list, and I'm sure we're going to see the same thing coming up, is that requires coordination and also agreement with other sectors of government. So when I'm looking at the first one about metering rate, I'm of course thinking about the Public Service Commission. And so to what degree are you working now with the Public Service Commission, and how do you, I mean, aside from persuasive abilities, what incentives do you have to convince the Public Service Commission or other sectors that are going to have to be implementing some of this to actually adopt the laws or the rules in the ways that you need in order for this plan to actually work?
Right. Great question. So we have been engaging the Public Service Commission throughout the process of this plan. We have a great relationship with Brandon Fry. He's included in some of that stakeholder engagement that you saw, as well as Commissioner Lewis coming here, staying engaged, and hopefully continuing that pathway of communication. I think the other piece of it is, sorry, I'm forgetting the second part of your question.
Oh, it just had to do with incentive. I mean, I'm thinking, it's the Public Service Commission has its own ideas, its own goals, its own ecosystem of people who depend on it and have influence over it. And so how do you connect with that? Right. It's a really important point that I should have pointed out earlier is, this priority climate action plan. Another thing you won't see up here is really policy recommendations or regulatory changes, and those obviously exist in the climate action plan, and those still stand, as do all of the goals, all of the actions that are listed there. This is really supposed to be a supplement to that, and not a replacement in any way. And so. I think the point with the Public Service Commission in particular, one of the biggest obstacles that we were hearing is kind of a regulatory issue there. And what we were doing here wasn't making regulatory, policy recommendation changes. And so the first bullet point there on improving the metering rate for community solar billing, I think that we were looking at maybe looking at feasibility studies, building out more of a fact base to be able to inform those conversations and those dockets that the Public Service Commission is having. So improving the tools that we have to facilitate those important conversations that need to be ongoing that you're talking about. And I think that that's really what that established the Community Solar Working Group. That was also looking at, we know there are regulatory barriers here. What we're not doing here is making the recommendations, and so how do we use this opportunity, though, to acknowledge that we need to address those issues to get to where we want to go? And so points like those two, you'll see capacity built in for regulatory agencies throughout, and those were our ways of trying to get at those regulatory issues and hopefully build the tools, build the capacity to be able to have those conversations that you're talking about. I have just one more follow-up if I can. This is really helpful, thanks. How important is the robust continuing work of this task force? How important would it be, or is it, to your work in the future to make sure that the deliverables that the federal government is subsidizing us, is encouraging to produce, that they actually come to fruition, given the fact of what you're saying? So I guess I really boil it down, how important is the work of this task force going forward in achieving the goals that you have for this? Essential. And I think, first of all, kind of this task force and the continued work has been essential in putting this together. Lakeisha pointed out, obviously, we just used the bones of, or
the Climate Action Plan as the bones for this plan, but also, doing this amount of work and putting this plan together in the amount of time that we had would have been impossible without the networks of stakeholders, of community groups that were already formed and accessible to us because of the work that this task force already did. And hopefully, I think keeping those networks alive and working through them is absolutely essential. The eligible entities for these plans, or for getting these funds specifically, are public entities, but for accomplishing the goals of these actions, it is absolutely not just the public sector. And so staying engaged on that and helping to guide where the state's priorities should be based on where the challenges are and where the obstacles are, I think that's absolutely essential.
Thank you.
Okay. And if there are more questions, we can always go back, but we can keep going. So the next one is offshore wind. Support 5 gigawatts of offshore wind power by 2035. That is directly taken from the Climate Action Plan. And you'll also notice a lot of these actions are building on other work that we've been doing that align with the Climate Action Plan, like the EDA Tech Hubs announcement, and like some of the work that DNR is doing to build out that comprehensive roadmap. So support a state waters technology hub that includes an in-water and onshore test center, identify points of grid interconnection for clusters of offshore wind in state and federal waters, develop an offshore wind manufacturing cluster, conduct a skills gap analysis to identify workforce training needs, support engagement with affected communities, and build local capacity and provide technical support.
And maybe let's run through them all, and
Okay.
then we can ask any
sounds good.
questions that remain.
Next up is community resilience hubs. Again, this is very much leveraging the HERO announcement that has been brought up several times already. I actually won't repeat, I guess, those outputs because they are directly from HERO, the 385. You've heard that already. Deploy carbon-free microgrids serving community resilience hubs and critical facilities. Facilitate community-driven planning to pilot new models for community-centric energy resilience projects. Deploy mobile battery storage units. Unlock compensation for energy storage as a grid resource. Incorporate energy resiliency standards into future building codes for community gathering places, and secure long-term federal loan for virtual power points. And I'll point out, Lakeisha noted this on the regional, local, and tribal engagement slide, but community resilience hubs were coming up again and again in our conversations with local officials. So this is a priority across the state, and really is, obviously, the state has HERO, and there are ways to build on that with these funds, but there's also a lot of opportunity for connecting the state's efforts with local efforts and building out more local efforts. Transmission planning, an output to increase new transmission capacity by 2030 by 2035. Again, that is, I believe, directly from the Climate Action Plan. The priority actions would be to develop comprehensive plan to integrate advanced conductors on existing and new transmission routes, develop an offshore wind transmission plan, facilitate regional resource strategic planning, and support essential transmission projects with technical assistance on siting, permitting, and other integration challenges. Industrial decarbonization, there's quite a few slides here. This is obviously our biggest greenhouse gas emissions contributor. We have, I guess I'll go through the outputs: enhance energy efficiency in chemical and refining facilities by an average of 10% by 2030, electrify 15% of all low and medium heat processes with a goal of 100% of all new and replacement boilers and process heaters being electric by 2040, and increase on-site renewable and clean electricity generation, including energy storage and grid integration, to 20% of industrial facilities by 2030. And we would do that through enhancing process efficiency through pilot and demonstration projects, incentivizing the electrification of low and medium heat process equipment, and increasing industrial access to renewable and clean high-capacity firm power electricity. And these were largely building on an industrial electrification study that was completed earlier this year that showed where there is high electrification potential in Louisiana's industrial facilities, which otherwise have pretty hard to abate emissions, and so trying to get at some of those maybe easier to abate emissions early on in this 2025 to 2030 period. Additional outputs switch 25% of all hydrogen to clean hydrogen used in ammonia and refining production by 2030, and transition 5 million tons per year of steam methane reformers to lower no carbon hydrogen. Those were supposed to be getting at Louisiana as both a major user and producer of hydrogen. And reducing demand for cement, iron, and steel and water and waste by 30% through material efficiency, advanced recycling, and other circularity initiatives. The actions there are switching to low or no carbon fuels, low and no carbon feedstocks, and improving product circularity and advanced recycling between producers and across the supply chain. And this is the final industrial slide. By 2030, apply carbon capture, utilization, and storage at as close as possible to 90% capture rate at a majority of natural gas processing facilities, petroleum refineries, and ammonia and chemical manufacturing plants, and reducing 6,331 tons of N2O emissions annually from fertilizer production facilities through N2O abatement strategies. The actions there implement carbon management projects in coordination with affected communities, capitalizing on opportunities for regional decarbonization, especially at co-located facilities, and reducing N2O emissions, as well as other greenhouse gas emissions criteria, pollutants, and hazardous co-pollutants. Next focus area is methane emissions. A lot of this is building on, again, the work that you heard about from DNR. Identify and address the top 20% of leaking and emitting wells. This was largely informed too by not only DNR's work, but also the work that LSU is assisting them on in identifying kind of where the highest emitting wells are. And so getting the biggest bang for our buck in plugging those wells, and support the development of 12 landfill methane recovery projects for recovered methane procurement. The actions there launch methane detection and monitoring program, expand orphan and active well leak detection and repair, launch pipeline leak detection and repair effort, support landfill capture and utilization projects, and pursue an anaerobic digester demonstration project. All right, fleet transition. This one, once again, has a couple slides. The outputs, I'll point out here too that when we say fleet in this instance, we were trying to cover not only public fleet, but also commercial fleets. Our stakeholder engagement really taught us that there's opportunity for those efforts to really amplify each other. And so trying to acknowledge that and realize that both are critical in getting even one to the goal that we want. So lead by example through state procurement, develop purchase incentives for light, medium, and heavy-duty public fleet procurement, plan for and deploy publicly accessible shared charging infrastructure for medium and heavy-duty fleet vehicles, deploy fleet conversion pilot projects and case study materials, develop a statewide evacuation and disaster strategy to ensure the resiliency of evacuation operations in the shift of electrified vehicles, and create a data repository to bolster statewide electric vehicle planning needs. Additionally, we would build capacity for maintenance, repair, and supporting infrastructure workforce, conduct a needs analysis and support education on electrical vehicle ancillary services, support local government and business education training and planning, expand markets for biofuels for harder to electrify vehicle types, and reduce idling, particularly near sensitive populations. Another focus area was ports. We had 4 outputs there: convert 100 berths at Louisiana ports to shore power by 2030, electrify 15% of port forklifts by 2030, displace 15% of Louisiana port marine diesel with hydrogen fueling by 2035, and mode shift 270,000 tons of material from truck and rail transport to barge. The actions there, how am I doing on time, by the way? Am I okay? Move faster? Okay. I'm trying to think of the best way to do that.
No, just keep running through it. I think
keep going? Yeah. Okay. Deploy shore power capacity across Louisiana ports, contract and install for on-site renewable power sources, deploy resilient alternative fuel transport stations near truck idling and staging areas, build hydrogen fueling barge capacity, support decarbonization planning to coordinate tenant investments and shared objectives, pilot a shared floating crane to encourage mode shifting, create electric forklift incentives, and identify locations for the deployment of natural vegetation buffer zones. Regional transit, the outputs here double the use of alternative modes of transportation by 2035. Once again, that is from the Climate Action Plan, and increase access to clean transportation options for low-income and disadvantaged communities by 10% each year by 2030. The actions are procure electric and alternative fuels public transit, pursue traffic improvements that reduce idling and travel time, increase regional connectivity through dedicated bus lanes, HOV lanes, and expanded bus rapid transit, expand shared use paths to encourage mode shifting and reduce vehicular congestion, build support facilities and preventative maintenance capacity supportive of existing and projected electric or alternative fuels buses and vans, and develop a regional transportation resilience plan that covers physical and operational vulnerabilities. Built environment retrofits, this one once again has a couple slides. Scale up to 1% annual retrofits by 2030, 2% annual retrofits by 2035, and 5% annual retrofits by 2040. That is derived from the Climate Action Plan, but kind of a ramp to get us on track. And then install 815,000 additional space and water heat pumps by 2030. The actions are prioritize energy efficiency upgrades that also improve energy and climate resilience, develop early education around end-of-life replacement and consider midstream rebates for contractors, provide health and safety funding for repairs and upgrades necessary prior to making energy upgrades and retrofits, develop a direct marketing effort around opportunities for low-income and energy-burdened households, develop pilot projects and case studies around the use of low-carbon and highly efficient building materials, incentivize audits and deep retrofit evaluations for multifamily buildings, commercial buildings, and industrial facilities, simplify local permitting, develop a statewide one-stop shop for state, federal, and local incentives, grants, and loans to encourage resource braiding, create a network of building retrofit learning hubs with trusted advisors, local contractors, audits and assessments, and new incentive programs. Create an independent third-party statewide energy efficiency implementer. Support workforce development for builders, contractors, and subcontractors, architects, and other design and construction professionals. And launch an energy efficiency and retrofits program for nonprofits that serve LIDAC communities. That's low-income and disadvantaged communities. We're in the home stretch here, I promise. So here we have urban and community forestry, kind of building on some of the funding that you heard earlier that New Orleans and other communities received. So an output would be to increase urban canopy coverage by 10% in low-income and disadvantaged communities in urban areas by 2030 through funding urban tree canopy assessments and supporting native and climate-resilient tree plantings. Second to last, we have sustainable agriculture. We set an output goal of reducing the need for prescribed burning on 66% of sugarcane acreage by 2030 by coordinating and incentivizing transportation for waste streams between industry and agriculture, standing up a framework for converting biomaterials to biochar, and supporting local food systems, community gardens, and small-scale urban agriculture. And last, but certainly not least, is coastal protection and restoration. So by 2030, replace conventional diesel and renewable diesel or electricity for 10% of coastal master plan project construction. And the actions here are collecting data on net greenhouse gas impacts of coastal wetlands loss, conservation, and restoration, and assessing feasibility of electric or alternative fuels dredging, and just overall better understanding and improving the total greenhouse gas impact of our coastal program. That's all of them. Do we have any questions? I don't know how we're doing on time. We can go back to different slides, but I'll reiterate as well that first of all, this presentation can be available to you, you know, as early as today, but then the actual draft of the plan that goes into each of these actions in more detail, as well as how we got to them and all of the process stuff that Lakeisha talked about, will be available next week for public comment.
And I'll also flag if any of you have specific questions that we don't get to address today, we're always available, email, phone call. We're happy to jump on a call or Zoom and discuss any concerns that y'all have if we run out of time today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hart and Ms. Engelhardt. And I'll open up to task force members. If you have any questions, I know there's a lot of information to take in and process. I'm sure you're all thinking on it. And Dr. Calavoda.
Much time, I promise. Just, it's very interesting what you presented, but I would ask you to think about the implementation and how you would go about implementing that. For example, the one that's on the screen there, you say by 2030, replace conventional diesel with renewable diesel or electricity for 10% of Coastal Master Plan project construction. Well, we can put that in the bid requirements for the project and make the contractor do that. But there's a lot of things you put up there where that's not necessarily that easy, how you would actually go about it. And I just wrote one down. Mobile, you talked about mobile battery storage units that would be deployed after disasters, I assume. Somebody's got to own those. Somebody's got to maintain those. And, you know, are we going to put that on the energy companies, and that's going to be a requirement the Public Service Commission puts on them, that you've got to own these, you've got to have a certain number of these, you've got to deploy these in disasters, you got to store them somewhere, maintain them, et cetera. But you need to think about that. And, you know, I've been in the transportation business for 40 years. Lots of people have ideas about we ought to build this, we ought to deploy that. Where everybody comes up short is, okay, who's going to maintain that? Who's going to be responsible for it? Somebody has to do that, and you've got to think about that in advance as to, you know, how these things would actually be implemented and sustained over the long period of time. And Mark, I know, can speak to that very, very well because he deals with the same issues I deal with. But thanks, that's it.
Absolutely. That's a really great point, and I appreciate you bringing it up. I think it's something that we should do another pass through the plan, but it's also something that, because exactly like you're saying, we are not necessarily the ones probably that would be maintaining it. Hopefully getting more input on from the people that would or could, I think is going to be essential. What we were trying to do was, you know, set ambitious kind of goals and actions, but realistic goals. And so understanding where, you know, getting right up to that line without crossing it, and input from this task force, you know, today or later is essential there.
And I would just add, that's exactly right. I would just add that in order to be eligible for the implementation funds, it needs to be in this plan. And so that's where, you know, you put aggressive goals, you know, but we think achievable goals, especially if we are successful in getting those $500 million grants. Mm-hmm. And so that's sort of where you gotta be aggressive to then hopefully compete for those larger grants. Yep. Good.
Yeah, and I'll also add that we do build out each of these in more depth in the plan, but do try to leave them relatively broad and vague, so that way it could be a state entity, but who would maintain it, for example, from the state might look different than who would maintain it for a city. And so not locking anyone into anything, but in the voluntary, you know, phase 2, where someone would actually be putting an application grant together, I think that, you know, as much as possible as we can anticipate what those challenges would be and include and make that application process easier, we've tried to do. But I do think some of that inevitably will end up more in the application and the phase 2 implementation side of it, as opposed to the planning side.
Okay. Good question. Professor Verchick.
Yeah, I think that's just a really good comment. And I just wanted to add that I think that one of the services that the task force could in the future provide is advice about that, because we're exactly a body that's constituted of people of many different kinds of sectors with many different kinds of experience, and that's exactly the thing that this task force might be able to help in working out strategy and the implementation.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Professor. Any other comments? You'll have your opportunity to submit additional comments officially on the 15th, but unofficially, don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call or send an email if you have any questions. And yes, we will make this presentation available, if not this afternoon, then by early tomorrow. Thank you both very much for your presentations and your hard work on this. I know it's been a lot. It's been a big lift and not a lot of time. So I think it'll end up being a product that we all can be very proud of, and will hopefully position our state well for competing for those big implementation grants.
Thank you. And the last thing I'll flag, I have it up here. I won't go into a lot of detail, but again, the implementation grants are due in April of next year. And then the next step for us, it does not end here. We will be doing an update to the Climate Action Plan with the goal of submitting that to EPA in 2025. So the work does not stop here. So thank you all for your time. I appreciate it and hope you all have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Now we're about to reaching towards the end of our agenda. Agenda item number 6, it's really kind of in lieu of a public comment for our task force members, but seeing how this is the last task force meeting of the term of the year, would like to open it up for any of our members to reflect on kind of where we've come, where we are, and where we're going. Mr. Robertson.
Thank you, Harry. My pens have run out of ink today writing down all of this information. There's a cliche called drinking from a fire hose, and I feel like I've been doing that all afternoon trying to keep up. I've been sitting here wondering who is going to be our contact once Governor Edwards leaves office. And I don't know how many of the staff we've dealt with are civil servants and how many are non-classified. I would assume the civil servants will stick around perhaps in 2024, but maybe the appointed officials will be shuffling on to bigger and better places, I guess. I hear Minnesota is in your plan, Mr. Vorhoff. So I don't know if you can speak to that or not, but I'm real curious as to, what we do to maintain the relationships that we've built in this process and the work that we have done to truly make it a resilient kind of a process.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I hope I'm speaking accurately. And I mean, I know I'm speaking accurately with respect to the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant is being administered by the Division of Administration, Office of State Planning, which is led up by Ms. Hart. And so that's a multi-year grant with 3 deliverables. We're about to finish the first deliverable. Then there will be 2 subsequent ones, a comprehensive climate action plan update in 2 years, and then a status report 2 years after that. And so there will be consistency and kind of through the administration change, presumably through that. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty with administration changes, but we'd like to think that there's been a lot of broad-based support, within government, within the private sector, to where the momentum will carry forward through the transition. We just heard from Commissioner Lewis with the Public Service Commission, and there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to engage, as there on decarbonization efforts. And so, kind of the short answer is, the Division of Administration is going to be doing kind of the climate planning through this grant for the coming years, and then to be determined after that.
So, Division of Administration then primarily, and Ms. Hart and her associates will be a good contact person for us. Correct. Without divulging any privileged conversations, has anyone from the current administration reached out to the incoming administration to talk climate?
I am not privy to all the conversations, so I don't think I can definitively answer that. I know one of our Climate Task Force members. Tim Hardy is on the transition team. Why he was not able to be here today. So I think there's at least some awareness of this task force and the work that it's been doing, at least within the transition team.
Very good, thank you.
Yep. Mr. Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. And I just wanted to say that it's really been a privilege to serve on this task force and do the work. Do the work with all of you. I really believe this plan has been a differentiator for the state. Much like the governor, I've been told by people outside the state that this plan has really put our state really so far ahead on many of these issues. And also, I think the plan has also caught the attention of the private sector, and we've seen that. We've seen that from a business attraction standpoint. Again, numerous projects have been announced in Louisiana or announced that they're looking at Louisiana. Again, the numbers are almost mind-boggling. What they add up to, those numbers add up to, and the projects, they cover the waterfront on many of these newer energy technologies. Carbon sequestration, lower carbon hydrogen, sustainable aviation fuel, offshore wind, rare earth minerals, solar panel manufacturing in Iberia Parish. And these are at locations throughout the entire state, not just focused on below I-10 or what have you. It's really throughout the entire state. That's another kind of, I think, benefit to all this. So I'm just left with the two takeaways that I seem to come back to, and one being continue this all of the above approach, and two, that we can really achieve win-win outcomes. We can continue to lower emissions in the state, and we can continue to provide jobs and opportunities for our residents and our businesses. So again, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for all the other members and their service. It's been a privilege.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lambert. Appreciate those thoughts. Mr. Moses.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, my background's in design and construction, both of infrastructure and buildings. And, you know, for several decades, the Division of Administration, Facility Planning and Control, we've tried to implement both effective and efficient projects, keeping in mind sustainability and resiliency. We've got a lot of work to do on that. You know, we've been working with Jeanette and Charles and others to gather data to further develop guidelines for design and construction. You know, we still got a little work to do there. You know, years ago, we didn't necessarily make the link with what we were doing to climate, but I can tell you after serving on this task force, the link is clear to the built environment. I want to take this opportunity to thank the task force members, all the presenters throughout these last few years, as well as the public input, and to you, Harry, for your leadership as chairman. I've learned a tremendous amount from each and every one of you, and I've really enjoyed being a part of the task force, and so thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Mr. Moses. Any other closing comments? Ms. Gautreaux.
Well, I'm following some very eloquent speakers, but I'll also offer my thanks to the chair, to the staffs of the Governor's Office of Coastal Activities and other agencies, and again, the members of this task force. When I think back that this started maybe 2 years ago, right, and on the same day that there was an hypoxia initiative announced, there was a Atchafalaya Basin initiative, and to sit through all these things and see the interconnectedness and how climate is such an important overlay through them all, and how much information we've shared and how far, I mean, I was really struck when listening to the information on the grants, like the team and the groups that worked on the action plan provided the bones for that, and I was just blown away. And I just think it's a tribute to the governor, his team, and again, all of the members of the public who participated and the task force members. So I'm very honored and grateful to have been part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gautreaux. And Mr. Professor Burchick.
Oh, he's got to turn on.
You're on.
Am I on? Okay. I just want to say it's just been a pleasure to be on this task force, and I thank the governor for inviting me. And we should all feel, I think, very proud, having seen this report today, of so many things going on that we were at least a part of. We're only the second state in the South to have a net zero commitment. And what I'm seeing and what I've heard today is that that's already boosting investments in the state's industry. The governor told us $50 billion and then 23,000 jobs perhaps coming out of this, and $9 billion just from the federal government. We've heard about the ability to increase affordable energy for people throughout the state. We've heard that this work helps promote climate resilience, which is another way of saying promoting public safety in Louisiana communities all over the state, and that, in fact, that's what local political leaders have been asking about across the state, is how to improve public safety in this way, and that these benefits of a growing economy and of safer communities, the fact that they need to be shared by all state residents, regardless of race or income or anything else, and that is in every single report. And so I just think that that's amazing, and there's no better measure of how one can improve the lives of the people who live in your state than improving their economy and improving their public safety, and we've shown that that can be done. The very last thing that I heard, which I'm very grateful to hear, and I think we need to pay a lot of attention to that, is that as critical maybe as we've been to helping bring some of this money in and promote some of the economy and some of the safety, I heard today that this task force is essential for the work going forward. And so if this state wants to continue, right, the expansions in the economy and the protection of communities and public safety throughout the state, the state needs lots of people and lots of ideas for that. And I think that this task force has proved that it can pull together experiences and viewpoints and interests from many different, not necessarily agreeing, corners of the state, and have us all work together and produce something that shows clear value. And so I'm proud of being a part of that, but I'm also, I think, even more really pushing that we consider how important that will be going forward, and that it's really important that this task force remain moving and helping to promote environmental protection and economic growth and public safety.
Thank you, Professor. Any other comments before we close out and turn over to, yes, sorry, Dr. Calavoda.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to tell my colleagues on the task force, those that are here and not here, that I very much enjoyed working with them in this process, and I spent a lot of time on this effort, and there were some very strong differences of opinion, but that's what it's all about, building consensus. And there's a lot of good policy in the Climate Action Plan, and I think that needs to be considered going forward because a lot of it can be backed up by age-old wisdoms of waste not, want not, and don't put all your eggs in one basket. Those have all been passed down to us by our grandparents and their grandparents before them, et cetera. And those are century-old wisdoms that people need to keep in mind, because history has a way of repeating itself, because people just can't seem to learn from what their predecessors are trying to pass down to them. And so I think it needs to be looked at from that perspective, because there's a lot of good policy in here, and I'm hoping that there is consideration going forward in the next administration and beyond to moving forward with a lot of this that's in here. But Harry, I've enjoyed working with you. I think you've done a good job herding cats because there was such strong differences of opinion. I know you and I have had a number of conversations about things. I'm sure you've had that with every member, but I appreciate your efforts too. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Calavoda, and I've enjoyed working with each and every one of you. It's been a real pleasure. It's been a learning experience. I think we all know a lot more about carbon capture than we ever thought we might know. But it's been kind of humbling to see what getting in a room together and talking about issues can do. And it was a virtual room at the very start of this effort, with COVID. But the work of this task force of staff, it was fun to see Lindsay Cooper in the room earlier, and the tremendous amount of work she did. But it's I guess just a testament to I think some people think about it as sausage making, but it's working to get to consensus is making compromises under looking at what other people their perspectives, and I think it bears kind of. The proof is in the pudding with the amount of dollars we've been able to successfully bring down, the investments, and so hopefully this is kind of Governor Edwards quoted Thomas Edison. Maybe I'll pull out a quote of Winston Churchill. It's not the end, it's not the beginning end, but it's the end of the beginning, perhaps. But with that, I'll turn it over to public comment. I have one card from Mr. Costanza. If you could just state your name.
Thank you. My name is Tom Costanza. I'm the executive director with the Louisiana Conference of Catholic Bishops. And certainly as just a capstone this, to put it in the deeper meaning of the work y'all been doing, right? In Catholic ethics, we certainly, the dignity of the person, the care for the poor, the dignity of work, but care for creation is fundamental. And creation is a gift from God. And so St. John Paul II, in his tenure as Pope, began Catholics to think deeply about the environment, its connection to human development. And so he raised the question of the environment is a moral issue. It's a moral imperative. And then Pope Francis in 2015 wrote Care for Our Common Home, which is a document that integrates care for the environment but care for human persons. And it began us to think deeply about the integration that y'all been talking about, but in pretty practical terms, what y'all been doing. And then just last year, Pope Francis again raised the accountability issue that, his last encyclical was Praise God. It was again reminding us of the integration of the environment and human development, especially in marginalized communities. That's always been a theme of Catholic theology. And so we just wanted, in behalf of the bishops in Louisiana, it's interesting when I go visit the bishop at home in Thibodaux, my diocese is disappearing, and it's a reality. I go to Alexandria, where's my broadband? And, we certainly are for pro-life and all of those other issues, right? But we have a consistent life ethic. Life is sacred from conception to natural death. And so this calls upon us to do as much as we can. And as much as we can when we meet with a new administration, we've always talked about care for God's creation, its current administration and in the future administration. So all we can do from the Catholic Church perspective is to try to, there has to be a cultural change also, and then a personal change. I mean, we could do a lot, but unless it's kind of integrated into your spirituality, it's going to not be as effective. So we just wanted to thank you from the bishops in Louisiana for your work, your dedication, and all the staff. And just be reassured we'll be with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor, say aye. The meeting is adjourned, but still much work to do. So thank you all very much for your time, and we will end right now.